See that?
Yep.
Can people see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming along today, and we're quite a small group, so hopefully, you know, it can be quite interactive. So as Luke says, I've put in a few sections for questions, but I might put in a few more depending on how we're going, because obviously I want to make sure you get the most out of the session. So I'm Josie Armitage. For the last 4 years, I've run my own business supporting not-for-profit organisations in the whole world of funding, grant funding and fundraising. So I do a number of things. I support organisations to source relevant funding opportunities, get prepared for funding, which is the topic of today's session, help people with grant funding applications, whether that's writing them or reviewing and helping people to write them themselves, and also providing general advice and support and workshops like today's session. Work out how to, sorry, that's it. This is just a flavour of some of the clients. Bramley Baths is on there. I know Jordan's here today. I'm also trustee of Bramley Baths. Just to give you a flavour of some of the work I do. So the MH there is an organisation called Many Hands, which is based in Silsden. I've worked with them for the last probably 6 months, and we've successfully accessed funding from 2 funders to help them provide workshops based on crafting, which helps with addressing social isolation, mental health issues. The Emmanuel project there, that some of you may have heard of, is a Bradford-based charity who support the homeless and vulnerable, and I've been working with them for about a year now, and we've successfully accessed a number of pots of funding that included supporting them to keep going during COVID, to support the homeless and vulnerable with hot meals and essential supplies. And we've also managed to access funding that's helped them secure staffing for a couple of years as well. So there's quite a range there. So why is it important to plan and prepare for fundraising? A lot of clients come to me and say, you know, we need funding quickly, but they're not really clear on what they actually want funding for. And I always find that I need to take them back a few steps to ask some key questions, some of which we'll cover today, to really focus on what is needed and why, and really get a clear focus on what the priorities are, because then it makes the job much easier if you know exactly what you want funding for and have prepared some of the background information up front. So it's important to spend some time. It might feel like, oh, I haven't got time to do this, but it's important to spend some time, and it will prove invaluable later on, to really think about what you want funding for, and to think about actually being able to clearly articulate whether it's a project or whether it's, for example, you need staffing to cover some of the essential services that you provide. And this is also really a really useful exercise to make sure that everybody in your organisation has that clear understanding of what you actually do and can clearly articulate that. Because often you find in an organisation, a trustee will have a different, if you ask them what the organisation does, they might have a different version of what the organisation does to if you talk to a staff member or a volunteer. So it's actually a good practice as an organisation to really get, nail down, if you like, what your organisation does. Preparation also makes it a lot easier to then target funding and fundraising opportunities and to target your resources to do that. And it's also key that funding is not seen as something that sits over there. It's actually an integral part of your organisation, and funding will actually help your organisation fulfil its priorities for the year, or work to its business plan. It shouldn't be seen as an afterthought. It should be seen as an integral part of the organisation's business. So I'm planning to take you through and provide some tips on planning and preparing for funding, and to cover some key areas which are things you actually need to be thinking about, and are also areas that you will be asked when completing a grant funding application, or applying to a funder, or it might be a company that you want to secure a donation from. So it's the key things that you need to be thinking about and preparing up front. I've touched on there already that this should be integral to what your organisation wants to achieve, and that will also make sure that it happens and is not seen as an afterthought and a bit of a knee-jerk, panic. We need to get some funding to achieve the priorities. Essentially, there are 3 types of funding that you can usually apply for. A lot of funders provide what they call project funding. So that will be a mixture of something that's badged as a project. So it might be a set of activities that you want to run. It might be an event that you want to set up. It might be to just help you continue to provide the service for your clients. There's also funding for running and core costs. So there are some funders who will actually support you as an organisation to provide funding, whether it's for staff or rent, if you're needing to rent a space or a building to operate from, and also like utilities, like your bills and things like that. Some project funding will also cover some of those elements, but very much in terms of what's relevant to that project. There's also funding for capital costs that you'll come across, and that covers things like if you need equipment for whatever it is you're delivering. It might be IT equipment, it might be something else, it might be a van, for example, to deliver goods from one place to another. It may be a building, you need to purchase a building, or to purchase a building, or it may be refurbishment. So for example, the Emmanuel project that I've mentioned, they'd recently moved into a new building, and we secured funding from it was Screwfix and B&Q to buy paint and refurbish the toilets for things, for example. You also need to think about what types of fundraising you want to do. So although I'll talk very much about grant funding today, because that's my specialism, all the areas are equally applicable to different types, but it may be that you want to do a crowdfunder, you may want to get donations from companies or individuals. And also you need to think about how much funding you need. So think about, I don't know, if it is, for example, something more tangible, like you need to buy IT equipment, it's actually, getting some quotes and costings for that and having those ready up front, rather than having to scrabble around further along the line when you're putting a project together. So thinking about who you actually want to help, and this is, who are the people you're organisation, your CIC, your charity are actually helping. First of all, it's thinking about what is the purpose of your organisation, which is fundamental, and often whether it's a grant funder or a company, they'll want to know a brief background about your organisation, what's your purpose. Sometimes they want to know about aims and objectives. So it's good to have a couple of ready-made paragraphs ready for that. So spending a bit of time to just really think about that. Often, particularly grant funders want that information in a very few words, as in a word count in an application form. So it's good to have something that you're happy with, that describes what you do, and you know, you can then play around with the word count at a later stage. Then it's really nailing down who are the people you support or help or want to help. And there may be, you know, your organisation may focus on one particular type of, you know, group of people. Or you may, as an organisation, I know, for example, like Bramley Baths will, you know, different activities will target different audiences. So you would need to, for each group of people that you help and support, think about those, who they are, and thinking through, you know, what are their barriers and issues, what are the things that they are struggling with, you know, what are the problems that you're wanting to solve through a project, through a service that you're providing. So as an example, the amount, and I'll just give examples from my clients. For example, the Emmanuel Project know that they're there to support the vulnerable and homeless in Bradford. They know their clients, and they will talk to them regularly when they're coming along to get the hot meals, etc. They'll talk to them. So on an ongoing basis, they're really finding out, you know, what are the up-to-date needs of their clients. Then, and from that, they know that obviously the fundamental issue is that they're struggling to have a hot meal or food to eat, but alongside that, they're struggling with that affects their mental health, the physical health. You know, they're quite isolated, and often coming along for a hot meal is the only time that they, you know, have human contact. So the other thing around this is, you know, really talk to the people that you are helping and supporting to find out what are their issues. Obviously you'll have a pretty good idea, because often that's the reason why you set up as an organisation, but really talking to people on an ongoing basis, you know, really nails that down. And often funders want to know how you found out this information, you know, from the people that you're supporting. And then obviously you've now articulated who you're supporting, what's the problem, and now it's thinking about what you're going to actually do to address the problem. And often this is what the nuts and bolts are, if you like, of the project that you're putting together to ask for funding. So for example, it's I've talked there already about in making sure you do involve the people that you're supporting. Funders, I know particularly the Lottery Fund, really want to know that your project is embedded in your community, and using community in its widest sense. So it doesn't have to be a local community, as in geographical. It might be the group of people you're working with. It might be a group, a community, if you like, that are there for a particular theme. So it might be that you're supporting mental health, and within that there's lots of different groups of people within that. Talked about talking to people, but you may also want to do other activities, such as a survey. Some organisations from time to time will do a bit of a survey monkey of their of the people that they support. And, you know, through that you can ask some specific questions. So if you are thinking, oh, you know, what about putting this service together? You could use a route like that to really nail down what people think of that. The other key thing, which is getting more and more apparent with funding, is funders want to know that you have involved the people that you support and the community in putting together the project idea. The less warm, if you like, with people saying, oh, I've got this great idea for a project. They really want to know that you've talked to the people you're going to support and that they've come up with the idea. Sometimes that needs a bit of prodding, as in you might suggest some ideas that they can kind of then comment on, and that really enables you to start to shape a project, even down to I don't know, for example, if you're wanting to put on a weekly support group for the elderly, for example, you could even find out through that, you know, which day of the week and which times are the best for that activity. And this is also thinking down to the when and the where. So it's all the usual questions: why, when, where, how, in terms of putting that project together. So that in your grant funding application, I don't know, you might say, we want to deliver a programme of weekly workshops for, I don't know, 10 weeks, and we want to invite 8 people for each session, and, you know, just some information about each workshop, the content, etc. So again, it's really useful to think about this up front, so that you know, you're not in a mass panic or being quite frantic when you're actually putting an application together. We'll just look at impact and evidence, and then I'll open it up if anybody's got any questions midway. So impact and evidence, and people get a bit, oh, this is a bit scary, or it's hard to do, but it is crucial in terms of thinking about what you do as an organisation and what you've achieved, as well as having this information in terms of thinking through a particular project or service. So track record, unless you're a brand new organisation, you will have already supported people through different activities or through providing a service. And you may or you may not have captured information about that. And that's information both in terms of, you know, statistics and figures. So it's things like, you know, for example, if you are running a weekly group for, you know, to support people with their mental health, it's some of the facts and figures, such as, you know, how many people are attending each group, how many people, you know, regularly attending, or, you know, you might think, oh, well, I want them to attend at least 2 out of 4 sessions a month, for example, and some breakdown of information about the individuals, you know, like age. It might be you know, the type of person, you know, whether it's an older person, a young person, you know, obviously very much depends on the service that you're delivering. And thinking about, you know, the impact. So I don't know, if you've been delivering that weekly group to support mental health over a few months, have you captured how people, what impact your workshops are having on people? Are you capturing, you know, how they're feeling? It may be thinking about how their confidence has improved or how their mental health has improved. And as well as facts and figures, funders really like human stories. So it's having some little stories about, and obviously anonymised, little stories about somebody that you've helped through your group, which you can then put, you can include within a funding application, or indeed you can just talk about people when you're having a conversation with somebody. You might also want to, obviously with permission from individuals, you might also want to put together some, short case studies of how your activity has, impacted on, I don't know, Fred, who attends your weekly group. And those, it can be quite informal, and the impact can be, the impact is really important to that individual. You might not think it's a huge impact, but for example, Fred coming along to your weekly group that's really improved his confidence. Before, he was reluctant to come out of the house, and that's a really powerful impact to capture. Also, as you're talking to people, you can jot down quotes, quite short quotes, which are really useful to bring applications to life and to bring in that human side of things. So it's really thinking about what difference you have made or want to make to people's lives. So that's kind of all of that is really useful evidence to put into grant funding, which it's in essence helps a funder to feel more confident that you have worked with this group before. This is the sort of impact you've had. And alongside that, it's really useful to have other evidence that comes from, so for example, comes from local sources. So if you're working in a particular, I don't know, if you're working in Bramley and Leeds, for example, you can access through the Leeds City Council website. They have ward profiles. They have profiles on each individual ward, and that has some key facts and figures about whether it's the education or health or employment of people within that particular ward. So that kind of also supports the evidence that you've built up yourselves. And also some people, depending on who the funder is or what your project is, you might also want to substantiate that as well with some national evidence. So some bigger charities like Mind, for example, have lots of reports and infographics that you can quite easily pull out, some good statistics from, whether it's regarding mental health, if it's Mind, or Scope, for example, if you're working with people with disabilities. And it just strengthens that evidence base. The other thing about, so that's kind of what you can produce as evidence already, but also in preparing and thinking about your project, you also need to think about, the particular project you're thinking about, what difference is that going to make to people's lives? What positive difference or what benefits? People ask this in many different ways. And they usually ask for some information about the benefits that you're planning for your project to have. But they also ask about outcomes, which is almost really distilling that down to some bullet points, if you like, of what you're going to achieve through the project. It's also sometimes described as how will you know your project is successful. So, for example, I'm working with an organisation called the Register of Tradeswomen, and they work with they're actually putting together a register of tradeswomen, so women who have different trades, whether it's plumbers, electricians, and there's just nothing there to, no list anywhere where people, if they want a woman to come into their house to do some work rather than a man, there's just no way of finding that out. And they're also wanting, we've been putting together a project where they're linked to that. They're actually providing a very basic DIY training course for its women who suffered domestic abuse, because they want to be able to do some of the basic DIY tasks themselves and have that confidence. So, for example, some of the outcomes that they've put together for that project is things like they want the women to have, gained practical skills so they can carry out basic DIY tasks in their own home. They want them to feel empowered, to be more in control of their lives by being able to do some of these tasks. They want them to, feel more confident and just feel generally safer in their own homes, knowing that they can, do some of these tasks themselves. Other outcomes might be, harder outcomes. It might be, I don't know. We want 10 people to have attended our weekly groups. We want 5 of those to have improved their confidence. So it's kind of just really nailing those down, just having a few outcomes. There's no point having a list of 20 outcomes, because that's something you then need to manage within a project, and also keep it very simple and realistic as well. Within that also, because often funders ask about how many people are going to benefit from your project. And people really struggle with this, like, oh, going to a bit of a panic. I don't know how many people my project's going to support. But my advice is, just be really realistic. There's no point saying I'm going to, 100 people are going to attend my group when it's going to be quite difficult to engage people to come along to your group. And there's nothing wrong at all with what you might perceive to be low numbers. Just explain why those numbers are low. So, for example, if you are providing a weekly group for the elderly, obviously you want those people to come along to those groups on a regular basis. So in essence, you'll be supporting a small number of elderly people for a long period of time. And it's just explaining that within your project, or within your explanation to somebody about the work you're planning to do. The other key thing, and then I'll shut up for a bit and let you ask some questions. Also, funders really want to know how, so you've got your list of outcomes, how are you actually going to measure those? How are you going to know when you have been successful? So it's thinking about the ways that you are planning to capture that information. And again, keep it really simple. Don't set yourself a huge mammoth task to do in terms of making life difficult for yourselves. Just think about, at a very basic level, some people just think about, well, I'm going to be working with this group of people, looking, helping them and supporting them with their mental health. So I'm going to, at the beginning of our support, looking at our outcomes, we're going to have a chat with them, maybe at the first session or the second session, to just ask them about, how are you feeling in terms of your confidence, your isolation, your mental health. And a lot of people, make it a bit of an activity or a fun activity, and get people to almost self-assess themselves, although that's a very formal wording there, about how they feel on a scale of 1 to 10. So at that first meeting, they might feel, I've got 0 confidence, I'm a number 1, if you like. And then asking them partway through your support, hopefully that will have increased a bit or a lot for some people. and then towards the end of the project, asking them again, and hopefully it's, you know, crept up a few numbers again, because that's really critical evidence that you can actually use as part of, again, the evidence of your impact on a project. You can also just generally ask people for regular feedback, maybe quite informally, but, you know, write down some of that information. If if there's some gems in there in terms of what people are saying, jot those down as quotes and ask if you ask permission from the individuals that you can use those. It may be that, and a lot of funders do want you to produce some case studies of the people that you've supported. So it's maybe having an individual chat with them, and, you know, putting together a case study. It could be that you ask for some of this information as a group, or you might want to have individual chats with people, you know, to really find out how they're getting on, but also through those chats, gleaning some of this critical information. And also through this, getting their feedback as well, because feedback is critical in terms of, you might think, you know, you're doing a wonderful job, but, you know, some of the individuals think, oh, if we did a bit more of that, you know, it'd be a lot better for me. So it's really gathering that feedback as you go along, and also improving what you're doing, changing what you're doing based on that feedback to make your, you know, sessions, for example, as helpful as possible, you know, to the people that you're supporting. I'm just going to pause for breath there because I've been talking a lot. Has anybody got any questions so far on what I've said, or want me to say a bit more about any of that?
Yeah, can I just ask, what's the most common mistake you see organisations make in funding applications?
A couple of things. One is not answering the questions. So although, like today, I'm trying to get you into the mindset of preparing information up front, it's equally relevant to not just dump all the information, if you like, into a funding application. You know, funders are asking particular questions, and often a question's got a few bullet points that they want you to cover. So it's really thinking and making sure that you have answered those questions. A lot of people who have not been successful with funding applications have almost just, I want to tell you everything that I do, and just literally dumped information into a funding application. And funders will say, you know, this is all very interesting, but you've not actually answered the questions. And obviously they're wanting each applicant to answer the questions, because particularly in some of the funds that are competitive, and, you know, they've only got so much funding to go around, they are actually comparing applications and choosing the best ones. So that is critical. The other thing is and it's quite difficult, is to get your sort of passion and enthusiasm across. Because with it, you know, you can put lots of words together, but what that sometimes loses is, you know, your passion and enthusiasm for why you are doing what you're doing, and, you know, why you set up your organisation, for example. So it's making sure within the words that you use and the language that you use, and also bearing in mind that you're answering the questions, it's getting some of you and your organisation and that flavour within the applications.
Yeah,
because that will make an application stand out, you know, if they can just really feel that passion and enthusiasm, as well as you know, ticking all the other boxes.
okay. And how do you find out about funding? Is there like local databases, or is there a national one that people can sign up to?
I've got a slide on that in a moment.
All right.
If you can park that one till then.
But that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks. Has anybody else got any questions, or shall we continue on?
Sorry, I've got a question, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Hello. No, thank you for that. That's really interesting. So at the start of the call, I said that you know, kind of in the process of setting up for a not-for-profit organisation. So we're currently running a pilot project, and essentially the company itself, it kind of works on a project by project basis. So obviously, I think on the first couple of slides, you mentioned like different types of funding. So you've got the project, running core costs and capital costs. I guess starting out, first of all, oh, are you still, sorry, my internet's gone a bit weird. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still.
Yeah, still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, like starting out, I'm just wondering whether you've got any advice on kind of what funding pots could potentially help the next project. And because the company itself is a project by project basis, it kind of needs funding to support each project, but also the overhead costs as well. So I know you said there was different types of funding that kind of merges those two aspects together, but it would be great to know if there's any that kind of pop out that you could advise me on which kind of cover those two different aspects of the organisation.
I mean, a good one to start with, especially as a new organisation, is and the link's on the slide when we come to it. It's the Awards for All, which is through the National Rotary Community Fund. You've probably already come across that one.
Yeah.
Because that's one as a new organisation you can apply to, because some funders will only accept applications from organisations that have been in operation for, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, and that information's, you know, often hidden in the criteria that they produce for their funding. The other advice I would give is to start off with some of the smaller pots, because you need to build up, as a new organisation, you need to build up that track record for being a trusted funder before you then move on to some of the bigger pots of funding. So, for example, and particularly if you have run a pilot project, which will give you lots of useful evidence, as we've talked about, in terms of proving what you've done so far. There's lots of, it's quite difficult to mention specific pots because it depends on, you know, the actual work that you're doing.
Yeah, sure.
So when we come to the, I'll finish answering your question if it's okay. When we come to the slide about funders, because, you know, that'll give you a bit more information once we get to the slide, if that's fine.
Yeah, of course it is. That's fine. No, thank you for that. That's great. Really interesting.
So I've done that. The other big thing, and people often leave this to the last minute, and it, you know, often it's quite difficult to gather some of this information, is policies and documents. So most funders will ask for a copy of your governance document. So it's making sure that you have got easy access to that. What I tend to advise people is, you know, and you will need electronic copies of these, because often you have to provide them either by email or through, you know, portals where you're filling in funding applications. My suggestion would be to have an electronic folder somewhere on your systems with all this key information in. So it's just really easy to grab and use for different funders. So first of all, your governance document, and, you know, I have worked with a few charities who, you know, somebody else had set up the organisation and it was a bit of detective work to actually find the document. and we've had to scan ones in the past, so we've got an electronic copy. If you're set up as a company, such as a community interest company, you can actually access your governance document through your information on Companies House. If you're a different type of community organisation, you will need to find that document from within, whether it's a trustee who's got that or somebody else. If you set up as a charity, you would have had to put that information together when you applied to become a charity. The other thing is to think about your governance, because this has changed and it has held people up quite a bit. Funders expect you to have at least 3 trustees or directors, and at least 2 of those to not be related and to live at different addresses. Lots of CICs that I've worked with have often been set up by, a husband and wife or, partners. And they're obviously either related or living at the same house. So when we've applied for funding, they've had to quickly get another director or trustee on board. So it's worth thinking about that up front and making sure you've got that. Also, another big area is your financial accounts. So again, making sure you've got a copy of the most recent full financial accounts, because again, some funders will want a copy of those. For example, I know on Companies House, CICs have to upload their financial accounts, but often they're like abridged versions. So it's only what they want to put in the public domain, but these are full accounts that people are wanting. If you're a new organisation that hasn't yet got to the point where you do produce financial accounts, funders who will fund, like the lottery, who will fund new organisations, want you to provide a financial forecast. So again, it's worth spending some time with your accountant or whoever to put together a financial forecast for the next year. So again, you've got a ready-made document that you can use. Do you have a bank account? And this is often something people don't think about, particularly when they're quite a new organisation. You need to have a bank account for funders to pay them money into. You need to, again, have at least 2 signatories on there, and again, 2 signatories who are not related and not living at the same address. And also, some funders who don't ask for the accounts will ask for a recent copy of a bank statement within the last 3 months. So again, it's making sure that you've got easy access to getting hold of that information. I've worked with a new organisation recently, and we got everything prepared for an application, but we then had to wait for their bank account to be set up, and there was quite a delay with banks recently to, they took a few months, if you like, to set up new bank accounts. The other key area here is policies. So a lot of funders, well, in essence, different funders ask for different policies, but the key ones that people ask for are safeguarding, and particularly funders like Comet Relief and Children in Need are really hot on this, and often will turn down applications because you've not got, the safeguarding requirements in place. For safeguarding, it depends who you're supporting. So you might have a safeguarding for children and young people. You might have a safeguarding policy for adults at risk, previously called vulnerable adults, but the terminology is now adults at risk. And if you do support both of those groups of people, you will need to have a safeguarding policy for each of those. Within safeguarding as well, you need to make sure that all your staff, volunteers, trustees receive regular safeguarding training and are also have had DBS checks, particularly those who are working directly with, with children or children, young people or adults at risk. Lots of funders, again, like Comic Relief and Children in Need, expect everybody to be DBS checked and everybody to have safeguarding training right up to, trustees, directors, even if they're, never going to come into contact directly with the people you support. So again, it's worth getting all that in place and sorted out. The other key policy is equality and diversity, or equal opportunities, it used to be called. And that's thinking about equality and diversity across the whole organisation, right through from, recruitment of staff and volunteers, how you're going to work with staff and volunteers, also thinking about the people you're working with. And then other key policies that are asked for from time to time are health and safety, and GDPR, or data protection, because obviously you are often collecting personal information about people, even if it's just names and addresses and dates of birth and things like that. So you need to have a GDPR policy in place. And if you haven't got any of these policies, there are lots of templates around. So you can either nosy around for those yourselves, or I can, send some links through if people would find that useful. Then quickly linking to, a few people have asked this already. So in terms of, now you've done all that work, you now know exactly what you want funding for, who it's for. That will really target your search, if you like, to find funding opportunities. Now, there are different types of funders. So there are foundations and trusts who will focus on particular groups of people or particular themes like mental health, and obviously you'll have nailed down exactly what you want funding for. So you can look for foundations and trusts that, I don't know, for example, support children and young people, if that's your target audience. If you're working with people to reduce social isolation, for example, or support their mental health, you can look for that as a theme when you're searching for funding. There are others like much broader funders, like the National Lottery Community Fund, which is the first one listed there, who, in essence, as long as you're supporting and working with a community and have come up with the idea for your project with that community and it's very much embedded, they will support projects of all different themes, target groups, etc. You've got funders like Comic Relief, who again, they're quite broad, but they have particular themes that are within their strategy. So their last strategy had a focus on like young people, women, and particular groups like refugees. There are other funds, of which there were loads over COVID, but there just seems to have settled a bit at the moment. There's lots of funds that pop up now and again. So, for example, I know at the moment, if you're working with people to build connections and reduce social isolation, I know the lottery have just announced their local connections fund again, which provides like up to £2,500, quite small scale. It provides up to £2,500 for quite short spaced projects to help reduce isolation. They had a fund earlier this year for that. Other funders will have, there's lots, for example, lots of foundations and trusts that are focused on supporting women, for example, who have had different pots of funding pop up over the last year at probably 6 monthly intervals, that are really looking for projects that really build up that independence for women from all different backgrounds, etc. There's also quite a lot at the moment of companies who are putting together, I wouldn't say grant funding, it's almost funding where on a monthly basis they will provide, might be 500, 1,000, 2,000 pounds to different organisations by virtue of filling in quite a short form with information about your organisation and a bit of information about what you do. And on a monthly basis, they've been, choosing organisations who they will provide that funding to. A recent one, although I noticed it closed the other day because I think they've been inundated, was Arnold Clark, which is quite a big national garage, and they were providing up to £1,000, to different not-for-profits. And literally it was a short form, and then if they approved it, they'd, nicely put £1,000 into your bank account. There's others like Persimmon Homes, who again, it's a very short form, and on a monthly basis, their staff in each office select a couple of charities that they want to provide funding for, and again, that's usually, I think, it's like a 500 and a 1,000 for that. And there's more and more doing that. I know Moto, the service stations they're just doing that, and IKEA are doing something similar. So that seems to be a current way, if you like, that companies want to give out money to lots of, very small amounts of money, but to lots of different organisations. I've just put some links there, and we will share the presentation with you after the session, so you've got that. I've put two on there, Charity Excellence Framework and iDocs, which I use both of these quite regularly. For both of these, they're both free, and you do need to, register to use them. The first one they still call it COVID-19 funder database, but in essence, it's a broad funder database that you can put in various search criteria, and it comes up with a list of open funds. So I often use that there's a search criteria for recent additions, which I often look at to see what new pots of funding are around. The iDocs, the link there is to Leeds, because that's how I registered, but in essence, you can register for that for your local area. And again, it's a searchable free database. For both of those, you can also register for their newsletter. The Charity Excellence one has lots of tips, and they also have an online toolkit where you can, if you want, do a bit of put in some self-assessment information for your organisation, and it will kind of rate you and give you a bit of an action plan and things like that if you want to use it for that purpose as well. The iDocs, they send a weekly newsletter with, just by email, with a usually quite a short list of key funds that have either been issued that week, or the deadline's coming up, because I find that quite useful. I've also put links there for Leeds Community Foundation and Give Bradford. Each local area's got its own community foundation, which in essence have a whole variety of grants, some much more than others, who basically they act as a conduit, if you like, for whether it's companies or health authorities, for example, to be able to pass money out to. So, for example, I know for the Leeds community, well, for both, there's an Ideas That Change Lives fund at the moment, which is for either new or organisations that are supporting people in the care sector, so helping people in the care, helping people who normally would have to have support from social care to be a bit more independent in their own homes, or helping to improve their mental health. And there's another fund that's related to the health and care sector that's open at the moment. They also have small micro grants, which are grants of up to £500 for very small scale activity. So it's worth keeping an eye on both of those. Or if you're not in the Leeds Bradford area, for your local community foundation. So that's just a flavour of, just to help you at least come up with some initial funders that may be supportive of your projects. Next steps, and this is just my suggested next steps. The template that I provided, which I know at the beginning a few people had problems accessing, so do let us know if you've got problems accessing, and we can make sure you've got a copy. I've essentially produced a template which has got a lot more information in than we touched on today, for you to use it as a planning tool in essence, so kind of start to jot down some of this information and really use it as a dynamic document to just get your thoughts in order in essence. And there's a bit at the beginning which kind of enables you to think, right, I've done some work on my template, I know a bit more about what I'm looking for funding for, I've done my funding search, I'm going to focus on these like 1 or 2 opportunities over the next 6 months, or it might be over the next year. And it just helps to plan. I like to plan things because then I can focus a lot more rather than a bit of a scattergun approach if I don't do that. It's critical, rather than you just sat in a darkened room doing this, try and involve your staff, volunteers, trustees, the people you're supporting, because they might have some great ideas of, how you can actually better support them through projects or other things. And then in essence, you're ready to hit the ground running and find those opportunities and to start applying. Just a slide about, if you do want further help from me, and obviously there's no, pressure on you to do that. I'm happy to, once you've done a bit more work on your template, obviously you've got that to take away for free and use, for your own devices. Happy to do a one-to-one follow-up hour, either for you as an individual, or you might want to involve, some colleagues within that. And I've mentioned to Luke that I'd do this, for people who've taken part in this workshop, I'd do it at the reduced rate of £30 per session. Obviously more than happy if people want further ongoing support from myself and want to become one of my clients. I can have a chat to people about that. And also if there is demand, and we could do some of these as power hours, obviously they'd only be 1 hour if it was a power hour, but there are lots of other areas where we could focus a lot more on particular areas, such as writing grant funding applications, really nailing down that impact and evaluation area. If there are other topics that you think, oh, that'd be really useful, more than happy for you to feed that through to either myself or Luke. And then before I let you answer more questions, that's my contact details if people more than happy for people to contact me by email or phone, or my LinkedIn and Twitter are there if you want to nosy a bit more about who I am and what I do. So I'll leave that up, but if people have got any more questions, don't know how we're doing for time. Probably run over slightly, but you know, if people have got any more questions that they want to ask, I'm happy to take those. Stunned silence. Hopefully that's useful stunned silence.
No, that's been really useful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was really good, really informative.
Yes, it's a good base start for me. Thank you, Josie.
Yeah.
With
So
obviously, you know, with such a large topic, with so many variables, it is quite hard to cover it all within an hour. You know, typically organisations will commit hours to this every single week. You know, that initial startup phase of getting your house in order, then starting to identify funds, then applying for monies. You know, so to be able to cover it in an hour, I thought it was fantastic, Josie. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Not for me,
Brilliant.
thank you. No.
We did run over a bit slightly there, but you know, it was all entirely useful and relevant. So you know, I hope you guys took a lot away from that. A couple of after things, we'll be sending out 2 things to you. One is obviously a copy of the slideshow for you to refer back to. Hopefully you've all got the template as well, and it's something that you can use now as an ongoing basis to actually start to build part of your fundraising strategy and put that into action. And we'll also be looking for a little bit of feedback as well. You know, there'll be some kind of generic questions on there. You know, how did you find accessing the Zoom link? But then some more for Josie as well. As Josie mentioned there, there's a possibility of doing more in future. So it'd be nice to know what kinds of things you guys are looking for, and also some nice feedback for Josie for, you know, just for her own personal development and organisation.
The workshops.
Brilliant. So we'll send it out to you this afternoon. And if there is no more questions, I'll call it there. And thank you very much for coming along. Keep an eye out for our next Power Hour, which will be most likely about video. We have a video and filmmaker who is going to do a session for us on how to create your own content without having to spend absolutely thousands on, you know, big coaches coming along, camera crews and all extras and stuff like that. You know, actually just doing it on a budget. So keep an eye out for that one.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.